Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming and welcome to the Blogging Your Science webinar slash workshop. Um, Today we're going to be going through a little bit about some like science communication and writing in blog stuff. So very happy you all were able to be here. This was put together by a bunch of us on the LTER grad student committee, and we're also very appreciative of beyond all the internal help that we've had, especially Abigail Borgmeyer, Tommy Shannon, Nick Lyon, who's also here today, Alex Rose, Gabe De La Rosa, and Marty Downs, who have all been instrumental in putting things together for this and also helping get things organized and also presenting. Um, but yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. Um, but yeah, so today we're gonna start with a quick bit of intro and like what we're actually doing here. Um, General LTR code of conduct stuff, which I think Nick, if you're able to help me out there, that'd be great because I don't know the specifics. But and then also just broad, where does the blog fit within sort of the general structure of the overall network and what our plan is actually for addressing things today. So today we're going to be focusing on a little more of sort of idea generation and actually talking through how to um, turn your experiences into things that you can write about. And today we'll be hearing from Alex Rose, who's going to be talking to us about the ABT framework and storytelling hacks. Abigail Borgmeyer, who's going to walk us through actually putting pieces together into a cohesive story, and Tommy Shannon, who's going to walk us through a little more about actually um, including personal narratives into our stories that we're writing. And then we're also going to actually have a part two to this workshop. So fun fact, while we were actually working on planning this, we decided we had so much that we wanted to share with you guys that we were going to split this into two things. And that will be more on the actual nuts and bolts of actually putting this together. So reporting from the field, interviewing, visual storytelling with photos and stuff like that. So keep an eye out for that. We'll have a date for when that's coming out soon. But yeah, so quick bit on why we're here. Also, I should introduce myself. My name is Thomas Sambiasi. I am a PhD candidate in the Law Lab at Indiana University. And I'm also the grad student representative from Kellogg Biological Station to the graduate student committee at the LTER Network. And I'm also one of the editors of the SSALTER blog. So if you've never heard of the blog, which it looks from the chat like a bunch of people here have or have submitted before, which is awesome. So we exist as a platform to share short stories about long-term ecological research, which is what we get our acronym from. And these blogs are often taking the form of graduate students describing their work and experiences conducting research at the LTER sites all across the network. But we're also hoping to incorporate more perspectives from other members at the LTER communities, including technicians, undergrads, postdocs, PIs, even which would be awesome to get those perspectives. So we're going to start poking people about that soon. And along with the LTR Instagram page, the Salter blog is one of the main ways that we can share some of the great work that's happening across the network with broader audiences. So we're putting on this webinar series because we want to share these stories about our work and how exciting we find it. But we know it can be difficult to present our work in a accessible way to interested non-scientists and even some of our colleagues. And especially when we devote so much time to becoming experts on our own little specific research corners that and presenting our findings in a journal format can be a little difficult to like jump out of that sometimes. So we all want to share our work with the world. So what we've done is organize this webinar series to help give you all the ideas and tools to do so in a really engaging way. And we're going to start today with the great presenters that I've already mentioned. And we're going to be walking through the different narrative frameworks, incorporating human stories, and weaving in personal reflections. And then, like I said, we're going to, in part two, which will be coming soon, we're going to work through more mechanics of actually putting the story on the story on the page, excuse me. And then, yeah, so of course, if these webinars leave you inspired to write about your work at your LTR site, we, the blog team, would love to hear from you. I forgot to put our contact information on there, but feel free to reach out to me. It should be on the website. We should be contactable through there. But We also hope that this series will support your science communication endeavors wherever you might be writing. So, with that, I'm going to hand things off to, I think Nick should have the next stuff to take care of from the LTER Network office.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Nick Lyon. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the on-staff data scientist with the network office. So I often do a lot of hyper technical communication to just technical. So it's like an interesting translation effort that is maybe comparable in some ways to writing a blog post. But yeah, at the network office, broadly, our role is to connect the sites, right? We don't exist as some other networks do, where there's this sort of hub talking down. We are sort of in and among the sites, providing useful infrastructure. That includes stuff like our website. We send a regular newsletter. We have events such as this one that we publicize so that everyone across the network can sort of plug into this really cool, really vibrant community. Um, Among other things we do, we have we standardize all LTR publications, and we sort of a good Zotero library of those things. And we fund things like synthesis working groups, where folks take existing data and then analyze them in new and exciting ways. So we many pots in the fire, but that's all right, and we sort of like it that way. In terms of Salter and the network office, we think that some of these initiatives are best tackled by the folks who are sort of on the ground in the sites and really have that, like, yeah, ground truthed knowledge of what it's like to do a day in the field or to exist at one of these sites as a person. And so like we are not well suited at the network office to write these blog posts. And so we're really happy to partner with excited folks like this team, like the graduate student committee, um, to empower them to like be their own message bearers, if that makes sense. But yeah, so I am merely a peripheral player today, but I'm super excited and definitely think that these blog posts are a really nice way of communicating some of the really cool work that you all are doing. I think that's what I got, so I'll hand off to Alex.
All right. Hi, everyone. Go ahead to the next slide, please. Great. All right. It's fun for me to be here. I'm the education and outreach coordinator for Niwot Ridge and McMurdo Dry Valley's LTRs. And with my work, my name's Alex, she, her pronouns. With my work for NIWAT, I developed a required for all graduate students receiving funding from NIWAT science communication and outreach class that I teach every fall. So all the NIWAT grads have heard this before, and I've taken part of my class that people always seem to find really useful and fun, and I'm going to tell you about that today. All right, next slide. Just a little bit about my background. I have a PhD in bird biology from Santa Cruz. And even before grad school, I did a lot of docentry and kind of volunteer management as part of my research, and found it just so critical to be able to explain clearly and in a compelling way, what we were doing and why, in order to encourage people to care and also be good citizen scientists. So I've done all kinds of different things, have taught in the classroom a little bit, and I kind of bring all of these different experiences to my science communication work. And I also recognize, having been a graduate student, being married to faculty, that the demands on academics are just so diverse and so strenuous. And I think it's really imperative that we're all good science communicators, but it's also asking a lot of people to just figure that out on their own. So I really try to offer people practical strategies for improving their communication that are, actually manageable to implement. So I hope you'll find that's true today. Next slide. Okay, so what I want to share with you today, some of you guys may have heard about. I find that the work of Randy Olson, who was a marine biologist who turned filmmaker and went through all the training to make movies, is really useful. His books are less useful. If you're interested in learning more about his stuff, definitely start with the shortest of his books. There are a bunch of these different narrative gems for like engineers or whatever. This is the one for graduate students. Really recommend it. It's short. I have it on the bookshelf back there. I won't grab it, but it's very readable, well digested. ironically, Houston, we have a narrative, has no narrative. And Don't Be Just a Scientist, which was his first book, really he has not solidified his ideas yet. So you may have heard of those titles, and he's really pretty well known in science communication, but I don't love his writing. But I do think that his blog, Science Needs Story, is really worth checking out. Um, yeah, and his ideas on the ABT and the narrative spectrum, I think, are really worth learning about. So next slide. All right, so everybody is, telling us as scientists that we need to be better storytellers. Um, that is, yeah, I think something that we're all hearing from lots of different avenues. Next slide. So why do you think that's the case? Why are we being encouraged to tell stories? And I'm happy to have somebody just speak up. I like to try to be interactive. Anybody have any ideas on why stories are important? We remember stories. Yes, stories are sticky. Absolutely. Why do we remember stories? Any behavioral ecologists out there? Yes, we have been telling stories for thousands and thousands of years, probably tens of thousands of years. Something about our evolution as social animals made it possible for us to communicate, and we do that through storytelling. And that is probably why they're so sticky, because our brains have evolved to capture information that is shared with us in the form of a story. One more thing, when you are sharing a story with someone, let's say you're sitting on a couch in your jammies, with a family member, either as a child or an adult, and you're sharing a story, what are the feelings that go along with that? Feel free to unmute if that is easier. What does it feel like to be ready for bed, reading a story, or you to yourself, or reading with somebody, reading a child a story? What are those feelings? Yes, comfortable, comfy, and relaxed. Safe, right? And so I think that part of why these are all the reasons that we need to become good at telling stories. That's why people are telling scientists to do this, because we want to convey information that people can ingest and that sticks with them, convey information in a way that makes them feel comfortable and seen and part of a community. And it's a natural way to convey important information, and it's also a natural way to convey emotion. So those are the reasons why we're being encouraged to tell stories and why people, convey information that way. All right, next slide. So what is a story? And you can go ahead and reveal the rest of the slide here. So a story has that, and one more these components, and you can read lots of books about the structure of stories and creative writing and all these things, but all stories have these four essential components. A setup, so you establish an initial situation, some kind of conflict that really draws you into the story, the development of that character or that situation, and then some kind of resolving climax that ties all the loose ends together. So these are the elements of a story. And it sounds so simple, but when we're thinking about, especially using our very analytical science brains to do something like this, it can be very intimidating. And it's just not natural, because we're really thinking about our science in a very dispassionate way. We're not thinking about the equipment in our laboratory as a character. We're thinking about it as a tool. And it's weird to write a story about a tool. So I think when people tell us that we need to write stories, this is where our brains go, and it's often really difficult to kind of get started. So next slide. So a kind of hack for telling stories, even with our kind of everyday language, is to learn to identify what Randy Olson calls narrative structure, which essentially is the core of all great stories, good political messages, advertising, great acceptance speeches at the Oscars. And he argues that the ABT framework is a way to structure good narrative. And so I'm going to teach you that now. All right, next slide. So the essence of the ABT begins here. We've all been to meetings where a speaker, say at ESA or American Ornithological Union, presents their work as a never-ending series of statements, or we've all seen abstracts like this. So brood parasites lay their eggs in the nests of other birds, and hosts incubate and rear their young. Obligate brood parasitism has evolved independently multiple times. Half of cuckoo species do this, and so do 5 species of cowbirds, 2 genera of finches, and a duck species. Darwin made some suggestions as to how brood parasitism may have evolved in On the Origin of Species, interactions between brood parasitic birds, blah, 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 blah. So if you're a bird biologist, you might find this enthralling, but the rest of us probably don't know where to focus. So next slide. That's because these are independent statements that are essentially strung together with a series of either actual and words or implied and words. They are facts that are all legitimate and interesting and correct, but there's no structure to this. It's completely unformed. And so this is what Randy Olson calls the and format, the AAA for short. All right, next. So there's no narrative structure to this. It's just like a blur of words. It's just, stream of thought, stream of consciousness. There's no contradiction, that really important story element that kind of helps us understand where we need to pay attention and make us care. It's boring. And ultimately, though, in our scientific context, it can be adequate. And that's because when you go to, a conference and you walk into the room to hear a talk about this subject, you're already bought into the idea that this is interesting. And so you're more likely to get something out of it, even if there's no narrative structure, but it's not going to work with an audience that doesn't already have that sense of why they should care. So that's the AAA. You can see that, I can't really point, but on the left side of the spectrum there, on the boring side. The confusing side, he calls the DHY. You can read about that on your own time. I'm not going to go into that, but I'm going to talk about the interesting part that's in the middle. Go ahead. Okay, so I'm going to give you another AAA, and we're going to turn it into the interesting format. So here are 3 true facts. Antibiotics are crucial medications that play a vital role in combating bacterial infections. Antibiotics work by inhibiting the growth of bacteria or killing them outright, allowing the body's immune system to effectively fight off the infection. The misuse and overuse of antibiotics have led to the emergence of antibiotic resistance, a significant global health concern. So we have all these facts, they're all true, they're all important. Without any structure, we're not really sure what to pay attention to or like what's the important problem. Is the problem that antibiotics are killing bacteria, or is the problem that overuse of antibiotics have led to this antibiotic resistance? So there's no like clues for our lazy brains to latch onto. Next slide. So if we use these 3 simple words, and, but, and therefore, we can structure the same information into something much more compelling. I'll let you guys read it on your own. So the interesting thing is that the inclusion of those words, but and therefore, does something in our brain, cognition-wise, that draws attention. Somebody says some facts and then says, but I am immediately listening for what's coming next. It's a reflex. And the therefore is very satisfying. That's the climax, that's the resolution of the story that we were looking for. So just by using these 3 words, we have the setup, and the potential and the initial hook of the story. And we want to make that quick. I'll talk about that in a minute. With the but, we get that complicating action, that conflict, that, oh, wait, I thought this was all cool and there's something that's wrong. And how is this person, working to make this better? Ooh, that's the therefore. That's the resolution of the whole thing. So we've built narrative structure. We've built a tiny story just using these 3 words. So next slide. So that's the interesting stuff, the ABT, and it's really at the heart of storytelling. What's cool is that you can structure any amount of content with an ABT. It can be a sentence, it can be 3 sentences, it could be your entire dissertation. So just thinking about like, what are the facts that support the conflict you're about to present? Where's the conflict that you are trying to help resolve? What's the problem? And then what are you doing about it with your therefore can really be useful. All right, next slide. So now, right, yes. So the whole point is that, so I guess maybe an additional point is not only does that language make things more interesting for your audience, it also forces you to think ahead of time about what is the central kind of narrative or argument or problem of your science story that you are really trying to share. It makes you really focus on the what is interesting to people part, not just sharing a series of facts with them. So one more slide. Yeah. Okay. So what I encourage you to do if you're interested in getting better at using the ABT is to start by just finding this pattern everywhere you go in the world. And it really is everywhere in the sticky stuff that we all know. So example. One more. All right. You can blow through this, Nick. Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet, and she was eating her curds in her way. But along came a spider who sat down beside her, and therefore frightened Ms. Muffet away. So that is a really tight ABT. I realized this one when I was singing You Are My Sunshine to my 1-year-old with an ear infection over and over and over again. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine, and you make me happy when skies are gray. But you'll never know how much I love you. Therefore, please don't take my sunshine away. So there are lots of these, and this is my favorite. I just met you and this is crazy, but here's my number, so call me maybe. I mean, that is like literally the ABT right there, not even having to put anything in parentheses. And is that not the stickiest song in the entire world? I'm sorry I had to remind you guys all of it because hopefully you'd forgotten it. But yeah, so it is actually everywhere in a lot of things that are really kind of part of our canon here in the United States. Go ahead, next slide. And so what I want to do next is to take some time practicing this. And this has been, a bit of a speed round here. I apologize that we don't have more time together. But I would like you guys to, we're going to send you into breakout rooms with 3 people. And you're going to be 2 rounds of this game. The first round, everybody is going to go around and introduce themselves using first an AAA and then changing it to an ABT. The second round, you're going to describe something fun you did recently with using an AAA, and then say the same fun thing you did recently with an ABT. And I want you to pay attention to what feels different as the speaker and as the listener and discuss a little bit in your groups. So I think we'll have like 7 minutes for this. And yeah, I don't need that much time afterwards. So I think we should be in good. Well, actually I do, but I can't remember what we said we were going to do for the breakout rooms. I don't know if you remember, Thomas Z. How many
Let me
minutes
check
we'll
really quick.
have. Okay. We'll send out a message, but let's just assume we have like 6, 7 minutes. Okay.
Back.
All right. I would love to hear from just 1 or 2 people. Like, how did it go for you guys? What was it like as the speaker to do the AAA and then the ABT? I'm gonna call on someone. There are no volunteers because I'm mean like that. Giselle, can I pick on you?
Hi.
Hi.
We only got to do the first part and one person got to do the second.
Okay.
Um, the people in I had missed some of the introduction to this, so the people in my uh breakout room were nice enough to explain it to me, and I think I
Sure.
got it. Um, yeah, I haven't had too much time to think about what like about it, but it does feel more clear once you switch to the ABT, is
Mhm.
my experience, at least so far, in translating, going from one method to the other.
Cool. Um, Sometimes people find it like a relief, like you don't know when to stop talking with the AAA because it's like you don't know like how many facts do people need to know about me. And then the ABT, it's like if you're structuring it that way, then there's kind of a clearer beginning and end. And so I find sometimes as a speaker, that's a relief to know when I can be quiet.
I appreciate that you said that because I've been actually practicing a lot for interviews, and that's a thing that could happen with me where I'll just
Yeah.
keep going. And so there's always like, oh, how to stop somewhere. And so this model actually, you saying that reminded me like, oh yeah, that's a really good way to kind of frame response.
It really is. And I will say, I'm glad you brought up the interview piece. I have had really a lot of success. I mean, it's really important to practice this. So when you go to write about your science, you have some other, you're building some muscle memory around how to do this. And yeah, being ready to do it in an interview makes a lot of sense. Also, any excuse like writing an email to, somebody about anything, just like challenge yourself to structure it with an ABT. It'll be a clearer, more focused communication. I've found it really helpful when having a difficult conversation with a coworker or a student. Like it focuses me on like what's the problem and what's the thing I'm trying to, suggest that we change. So all those things can be really useful ways to practice so that you're ready to rock when you go into that interview. Can also be an awesome cover letter trick as well. Anybody want to talk about their experience as a listener?
I will. The last example that happened in our group um, was Megan, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, Megan, but this is a compliment. But when she was doing her AAAs, it's exactly what you were just talking about, where she was trying to formulate her thoughts, and she, was saying all these A's and A's and A's, and she's like, "Am I doing this right?" And then when she did the ABT, she just did the ABT, like boom, 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 like well, well, well. And so
That's
it was interesting as the listener to see the ABT just like she just did it like really, really well and was struggling with a bunch of A's. So as the listener, it was fun to watch her ABT after that.
That's awesome. Yeah, it feels good in both roles. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Carrie. I was going to say something else, which I think is really important to remember. Um, our brains use a lot of energy, just biologically, that is true. And certainly, as somebody who is a frequently kind of tired, overwhelmed mother and woman in the world, my brain gets tired easily. So these are all cheats to packaging your information in ways that your audience can actually take something away from, right? Like you're not asking them to do too much. You're not asking them to sift through these facts and figure out what's important. You are really making that clear for them. So it's actually really useful just to think about it too as like we're all tired and overwhelmed. And so like as a scientist, do a little work for your audience and help them be lazy and still learn something. So let's go to the next slide. I'm sorry we didn't have more time to share and practice and have fun with this, but hopefully this will be useful anyway. So I really like this chart. This came out of the NSF-funded Portal to the Public program. And the idea here is on the left-hand side of the slide, we see how scientists think about packaging information for other scientists as their audience. We love a lot of background. Like think about in our papers how much time we spend describing all the stuff that's happened before we even thought to do our experiments. We deliver all this background thinking like, this is what's going to get people excited about my work. And then we give a bunch of supporting details, our methods, you know, how we approach the problem. And then we spend relatively short amount of time with the results and the conclusions. The public, I don't love that term, but this was the diagram that I have, you know, non-scientist audiences or people who are not familiar with your science, they don't really need all that information up front. In fact, they're just going to shut down. So they want to know almost immediately, like, what's the bottom line here? What are the really important facts I need to know? Why should I care about it? So we're going to spend this diagram as the amount of time you should spend. Give them the bottom line, give them these A's, these couple important facts to get them curious. Then tell them the but, like, why do we care? Why is this important? Why should they be engaged? And then with the therefore, you can deliver as many supporting details as you think their excitement about it allows. But kind of like flipping that structure from your science audience to somebody who doesn't know that they should be interested in this is really important to think about. So next, so basically this looks like giving a really quick A-B and then a detailed T. So give a quick compelling setup to hook your audience, and then they'll be excited to hear what your solution and action was in response or what you're working on now. Berry Gordy was the producer of like all the Motown hits that we all know and get stuck in our heads. My Girl, You Can't Hurry Love, Stop in the Name of Love. If you think about what happens at the beginning of each of those songs, he goes immediately into these catchy riffs that you can play 3 seconds of the song and everyone knows what that song is. And his motto was hook them in the first 10 seconds. If you don't get them, they're going to change the radio channel and move on to something else. And so it's really that philosophy that we have to think about here. Throw out something cool and people will pay attention, and then you can reel them in and give them some more detail. Okay, next. Yes. All right. So I have a couple things. I wanna try, we don't have much time and I don't want to take time away from Abigail. So let's go to the next 2 slides. I've never actually, the next slide. I've never shown these videos before, but I heard this commercial recently and was really compelled by it. Let's see if we can come up with an ABT from this video here on the left. So we're gonna play this video and then just be listening to see if you can turn it into an ABT. Go ahead. Sound. I think you have to share the sound. Uh-oh, can you pause it? Are you guys hearing the sound? No, I'm not doing anything on my end. Should I be doing anything on my end?
Is it okay just to read the
I guess
subtitles?
so, actually. Sure.
Sorry, not that I would rather hear
No,
the
you're
sound,
right.
but
Go for it.
for time.
Okay, it's really powerful in her voice. I'm sorry you didn't get to hear that, but Oh, right, we're already past the 5-minute mark. Okay, I'm gonna leave these slides here, sorry. And you guys are gonna look for the ABT on your own free time. Show these to your lab mates. There are 4 of them. And go to to slide 18. Go 3 more ahead, 2 more ahead, 1 more ahead. This one. Go back. This is a really fun one to sit with. We don't have to do it now, but I'd love for you guys to look through this and come up with an ABT that is being told in this picture, which is a commercial for Legos. These are the kinds of ways that I think it's really great to practice. When you find something sticky in the world, ask yourself, is it sticky because it had that ABT structure, either implicitly or explicitly? And hopefully, I have converted you, and this will be a really useful hack for creating narrative in your writing, even when you're not feeling like telling a story in the traditional sense. So last slide is just thank you. There's my contact information if you have any questions. Happy to follow up, and I will pass the mic to Abigail. Abigail, sorry.
All good. Thanks so much, Alex. You set me up super well. Okay, so my section is going to, well, first, my name's Abigail Borgmeyer. You she, her pronouns. I'm currently a postdoc at the University of Florida. My email is found at the bottom if you want to follow up with me on anything we talk about today. And I have written a couple pieces for the SSALTER blog, which is how I found my way here. But I also did this program called Young Voices of Science. I think it's another science communication training course. I highly recommend it if anyone's interested. And we did this exercise in that course. And so I thought I'd share it with you all today. And this tool we're going to use is more about idea generation than like the nuts and bolts of science communication and writing. We're going to use connections between different parts of our lives to find inspiration about what you might like to write about. And kind of like the basis of why I think this is a really effective tool is that in addition to the science you're doing, your personal experience is really valuable. And storytelling through that personal experience is a really effective science communication tool, like Alex, showed us really, really well. Next slide, thanks. We're going to be making a personal meaning map. And these are really common. You can think of it like a mind mapping or a mind web tool. If you have access to like a piece of scrap paper or a notebook page and a pen, anything that you can find on hand, and take your piece of paper, and if you could make these little boxes towards the top of your paper, kind of you can see I'm showing here. And in one box, I'll have you write the word science. In the next one, the word nature. And then the third one, I wrote education when I first did this, but you could also write outreach or communication, something, some word that inspires you to think about turning your science or your experience outward. And so I'll give you today just 7 minutes to make your map. And the way that this works is that I've given you these 3 words. And I'd like you to reflect on each one of these words at a time. So first start with science, and you can either write like a bulleted list, or you can make some little doodles, drawings, however you think best. What comes to mind when you just think of your science? And then move on to the word nature. What comes to mind when you think of nature? These could be like facts you think about. They could be values or emotions, past experiences you had, whatever whatever is evoked in you when you think of that word. And then again, move on to that last word, same exercise. And then where this gets, I think, most useful is start to draw connections between these boxes. And so again, these could be like you physically draw an arrow, or maybe you like circle some words, maybe you highlight in like a different color, things that you can draw connections between these different areas. So in the end, this like 3 disparate boxes will look more like a web after you've filled it out based on your own experiences. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, so here, this is just illustrating. You can make a bulleted list. Just one more. Click, Thomas. Thank you. And so I'll give you an example of based on a piece that I wrote for the SSALTER blog. I wrote Ecology, the Science of Resiliency. It's about, I wrote this after the inauguration and kind of the fallout in reduction in science funding and other major policy changes that had really real life consequences to a lot of us in different parts of our lives. And so under science, I wrote about climate change, disturbance, and adaptation. I do work in Antarctica, and I was in Antarctica while after the inauguration happened, and so I was very separate from the world, but also very much in where I do my science and in some really inspiring parts of nature. So under nature, I wrote, "It's inspiring to me. Nature is resilient in the face of change." And then under education or outreach, I think about doing outreach to inspire others, as nature has inspired me. So I drew an arrow between those parts of the boxes. I think of education as a call to action for people, and also maybe a pep talk in the face of challenges. So I could draw a couple of connections between science and nature, and then between nature and education. And based off of these connections between different areas of my life, I wrote this. It was really cathartic for me to write. I hope it's cathartic for other people to read. This article that combined what I've learned from different parts of the environment in Antarctica to connections in our life based on policy and the effects of policy in our life. Okay, so that's my example. Tommy, if you could click one more. I'll give you 7 minutes to work on your map. And then after that 7 minutes, we probably just have time for like one person to share your experience. You could either physically show your map that you've made, or if you feel more comfortable, you can type a couple of comments in the chat after you finished. And just some ideas if you feel a little stuck. You could think about connections between like different parts of yourself and your career, or maybe think of like a single experience you had either in the field or in the lab recently that's really stuck with you, or an event you've experienced recently. Maybe it's not related to science, but through this you could find relations to science, nature, and education. Okay, I'll let you go. I'll send a message in the chat. We're at 1 minute, but it will be, let's say, like 4 after the hour. Go for it.
I am a postdoc at Florida International University, working with the Florida Coastal Everglades LTER. I'm here to talk about putting personal perspectives into science communication, and I feel like I was just teed up really well to start this conversation. So I want to start by saying it's okay to have emotions. And I feel like this is an important thing to state because as scientists, we are told not to do this. And especially when we write, we are trained to write in a very dispassionate, straightforward sense. We are taught to use passive voice. We don't even use the word I, right, in our writing. But when we're doing forms of science communication that aren't journal publications, I think it's okay and important that we are conveying other parts of ourselves in our writing. And it's valuable for a number of reasons that I'll dig into a little bit. So why? Why have emotions rather than just being the cold stone scientist that we like to be? Well, I think primarily it really helps people empathize and immerse themselves in what we're presenting to them. Um, when we present ourselves as part of the scientific experience and part of the research experience, not only are we helping other people connect with why we're interested in this and what's important about our work, it really is engaging, I think, for people. And people really start to relate to what we're telling them when we present something of ourselves. We are empathic creatures, but it's way easier for us to actually understand what it's like to be in someone else's position if we start to be able to connect with that person. It makes our writing engaging. Um, when we are expressing our emotions, when we are expressing what our perspectives are in a situation, that's very interesting to people. And I think it reaches out to a broader audience than what we might otherwise reach if we are just presenting scientific facts. It conveys importance and part of the research process. Uh, you know, again, these aren't the parts of the research process that necessarily make it into a scientific publication, but there are parts of the research process that are very important for us to communicate in other avenues of science, especially regarding like what are our motives for doing this work? Why is this work really important to us personally? What was the process like in the field? What was the process like in the lab? I think that there are people that are really interested in these things, and by conveying what our perspective was as somebody doing the research, we can convey that a lot more effectively. And to be perfectly honest, some people are more interested in your experience than they are in your science. Um, as science communicators, sometimes we need to meet people halfway. A lot of us are not watching nature documentaries because we're interested in the ecological mechanisms going on. We're interested in the pretty animals and the cool stories that they tell through the screen. I think that if any of us met somebody who had just come back from an expedition to the bottom of the sea in a submarine, the first question we asked them probably would not be about the kinds of crabs they saw down there. It would be, what was it like to be in a submarine, right? I think that that's what's really interesting for many people. And it is important for us to recognize that and provide that so that we provide that hook and we provide that general interest in what we're doing to encourage people to then become excited and interested in the science itself. So I want to share a short story about why I think this is important. This is my friend Kenny. I met Kenny on the day this photo was taken. We were both going to Washington, D.C. to advocate for the health of the Everglades at Congress. And Kenny had never actually been to the Everglades before. And so I said, well, I'll take you out. And I took a couple other people out and I took them to a cypress dome. And when we got into this dome after a pretty hot hike, everybody got really quiet and everybody just breathed and enjoyed this beautiful moment. And Kenny told me afterwards, he was like, that was such a spiritually important moment for me to be able to go into this place and enjoy nature like that. It really helped him connect to the land and to the Everglades and to nature in a way that he never would have gotten if he hadn't been able to have this emotional experience in nature. Kenny now works in Washington, D.C., and I actually spoke with him a couple weeks ago because he was helping us make sure that we have funding for our LTER. So it was a very important experience for him, and you can understand what the ramifications were, right? So it's really important to have this emotional connection with people when we talk about our research and when we talk about nature. How do we have emotions as scientists, right? Okay. I think that the first thing that we have to think about is breaking out of the writing style that we are very comfortable with as scientists. Being aware that we have a traditional style of writing, which is this very objective, boxed perspective on this is what happened and this are the results, right? You have to be aware that you have that tendency in order to start to break out of it. I think it's important to start really doing more description in what we're talking about when we narrate what the experience of doing our research is like. I'll dive into that more. And then the use of I feel statements become very important. And that's something that we're probably not as familiar with as scientists in our writing, but they are very valuable for getting people to engage with us and connect with us and want to engage more with the science that we're presenting. Okay, so let's dive in a little bit deeper. One of the big messages here is that it is important for us to put ourselves in the picture of science. The photo you see here is one of my field research sites when I was doing experiments in the coastal Everglades. Those are dwarf mangroves. I was doing experiments on the periphyton, looking at how seawater intrusion was going to be affecting it. It's a pretty picture, but it is not nearly as compelling and I think engaging as this one. This was my field technician who was out in the field with me, dragging around all of our equipment as we waded hip deep through the water and the mud in the pouring rain, right? Immediately, this photo has more sensation. There's more, you feel like, oh, the idea of having just a soaking wet shirt and of being waist deep in the swamp and of being in that environment becomes a lot more tangible. And we're able to mentally put ourselves in her shoes because we see her in the photo in a way that you don't have that connection with if you're just seeing the environment itself. And so that's what I'm encouraging us to do here is to put ourselves into the pictures we're painting so that other people can also put themselves into the picture we're painting and start to really connect with what we're talking about. Just to provide one more example, here is another one of our LTER sites here in the coastal Everglades. This is a much taller mangrove forest, and we have these boardwalks that we have to go through so that we can get to our sites. And the photo on the left is just the boardwalk. The photo on the right is my friend Paige. And you can just tell, but the fact that you have someone in that photo immediately makes you, as a human being looking at this image, feel like, whoa, okay, I suddenly feel a sense of unbalance and a sense of adventure. And it's easier to imagine yourself in that situation because you see someone else in that situation. So that's what we're doing here. Now, I love photos, and I'll be talking more about them in the second part of this presentation series. But for today, we're really talking about our writing. And so if we don't have photos like the one you see on the right, how do we really paint that picture with our words? And I think it's really important for us to describe what the experience of doing that work was like. I'm going to talk a lot about being in the field, but it certainly is not limited to the field. You can talk about this in the lab. You can talk about this behind your desk as you're working from home, right? All of these things are an experience, and putting ourselves in that experience and sharing that is very valuable. One of the easiest ways, I think, for us to express what that experience was like was to describe the tactile experience of doing that work. What were we hearing while we were doing this research? What were the textures that we were feeling? What were the colors around us? What sensations were we experiencing? What were we wearing, right? Those are all the sorts of things that really ground the reader in the experience that you're sharing with them and help them to feel like they were there as well. When you are providing these sorts of details, and I hope you are, as I talk about this, thinking about your own experiences and maybe jotting down some notes for our little workshop session at the end, I want to give you a piece of advice, which is a very simple piece of advice that I've heard in every creative writing workshop I was ever in. Show, don't tell. The idea here is that when we are describing our experiences in the field or in the lab, rather than say, it was hot out, it was 95 degrees, right, is what we might say as a scientist who likes numbers and units, really describe what you experienced rather than just describing, the environment itself. So here, instead of saying it was 95 degrees, what I might write was, our hats were the only shade from the beating sun. Operating the field instrument required two hands, so I could not wipe the sweat beading on my forehead. It ran down my face and neck while I took the reading. Right? That is such a more tactile experience. And I think when I read that, hopefully you start to feel yourself experiencing that sort of a situation mentally as well. And it's much more engaging. It's something that you're going to remember a lot more than, oh, it was really hot out, right? All of a sudden, the importance of it being hot and the experience of it being hot is something that you really feel. And you're now way more engaged. I feel like when you read this, you're probably also rooting a little bit more for the person in the story because you can sympathize with them more. As one more example, out in the Everglades, we have a lot of sawgrass. And sawgrass can cut you, but I really love the description that one of my friends gave of sawgrass, where he said, walking through sawgrass feels like being clawed by 1,000 tiny cats. And it's just such a more descriptive experience of exactly what it is like to be like nipped at and clawed at by all these little jagged edges as you're walking through the sawgrass. And it's another thing that really helps you convey what's going on. Okay. In addition to talking about your tactile experiences, I think it's important for us in our communication to be introspective, to be reflective on our own experience, and then to verbalize that reflection in our communication. So I'm just going to provide some prompts here. What were your thoughts and your feelings and your reactions as you were doing this research? And some subpoints to that, what was exciting or what was worrying as you started the research or as you were conducting this research? What captured your attention during the research? Was there something about the work you were doing that you didn't expect to be really engaged with and it really caught you off guard? Wow. What did the experience make you reflect on or remind you of? As you're doing this work, as you're conducting the data, did this make you think about the broader, bigger picture or the some other research that your researchers associated with? All these things are things that you can bring to your story and bring your audience into your mind and then share these things with them. And there's very valuable reasons to do that. Just one more, what other, mental sensations are you going through and why are you going through them? And the why I think is really important for really sharing, why are you feeling these things? Why in the context of this story is it so important for you to be doing this and to be sharing this? And the reason for much of this is that one of the reasons, I suppose, it's an opportunity for you to connect your science that you're telling about in your blog post or in your story or in any communication to other things, to other research, to bigger picture concepts, and to personal reflections if you want. So to provide an example of that, here's what I've just written up a little thing that says, immersing myself in the insect noises of the forest made me feel a strange mixture of belonging and loss. I felt surrounded by vibrant life, yet was struck by how rare this symphony has become in my life and in the world at large. Other research has shown that flying insect biomass has decreased 75% in the last 27 years, right? And so what I'm doing now is I'm providing an actual experience I went through. I'm connecting that to how I felt about the experience and then using that as a connector to link to other research and start to inform people about the science and what really is going on here in the world. And so you can use these personal connections as a door that you can open to get people more engaged with the science. Okay. And then one of the last prompts I will have for you is, why are you doing this? Why are you communicating this research? Why are you doing this research at all? I think that many people have those questions. When I tell people that I wander out in the swamps, they wonder why I'm doing it. And so it's important for me to be able to convey to people what it is about the research I'm doing that is interesting or important to me, right? Why do I care about it? And therefore, why should other people care about it? I think that's a really compelling point that we can share with people. I think another way to frame that is what drives you. What about the research process is very important for you? Okay. As a little example that isn't field-based, I wrote, I love data analysis. There are gems of crucial information buried in the numbers, and it feels incredibly rewarding to discover them, right? There are things that I think we really love about research, which are why we are here. And sharing why we love these things and what drives us and compels us to do this work is something that is really going to engage other people. It's something that other people might empathize with, and it might make them more engaged and excited about the work itself. And in addition to those things, the interpersonal, like why literally are you doing the work that you're doing? So this strict scientific way To describe that would be something like, to evaluate the responses of wildflowers to herbicide use, we studied blah, 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 right? A way that we can shift that just a bit to put our own perspective into that description a little more would be to write something like that. We were concerned that roadside herbicide use might be detrimental to nearby native wildflowers, which are important for supporting insects and migratory birds. Therefore, we conducted a study, right? Now you're showing, why is this work important to me? And by showing why it's important to you and why you wanted to do this research at all, you're showing other people why maybe it should be important to them too. And I think it is more useful for us to tell people why it is important to us than to tell them why it should be important to them. If you're trying to tell somebody else how to feel, people don't tend to like that. But if you tell people why you feel a certain way, other people are going to be much more receptive and much more willing to consider your perspective. Okay, just a couple extra little writing prompts that I'd like you to think about as you think about adding personal narrative and personal perspective to your science communication. One is you are just one character in the story that you're telling. There are, or should be, other characters. Science does not happen in a vacuum just by yourself. So who are the other people around you? You can bring their perspectives into your story as well. You can bring their voices and their opinions and all the things that we've just talked about into your story and provide more diversity to the voices that you are sharing in your story. So just two little examples here. It could be something as simple as Michelle called me over and excitedly pointed to the screen. Check it out. I've never seen this fish here before, right? I'm showing somebody else, I'm showing their emotion, how excited they are about this situation. And I'm talking a little bit about the science. Wow, novel fish in a new place, right? Another way to do it would be to describe what someone else has said, almost more in a journalistic style, right? For Mike, data publication is about reuse. I worked hard for this data. I want it to have as big of an impact as possible. I hope other people compare our ecosystem's trophic structure to their own, right? You are showing the science through somebody else's eyes, and what they feel about it is important. And that, among other things, lets you have multiple avenues of justification for why this work is important. Maybe you feel one way about it and someone else feels another way, and providing both of those perspectives is going to help you connect with a more broad audience. And then what about the research made you say, wow, this is, I think, what's most important to me, honestly, when I write. I really try to express the things that made me just go, wow, that's so cool. I think those are the most engaging things about the work we do. So for me, this is personally, I had never seen such beautiful creatures under a microscope. When I looked at algae under the microscope for the first time, it hooked me in a way that I cannot express. And it's something that I've heard a lot of algal researchers say. I looked at this under the microscope and it was so beautiful. I was hooked for life. Another, just, I made this up. This isn't real, but the results are astonishing. 89% of all methane emissions were coming from a single cow, right? If that were true, it would be astounding. And it would certainly stick with people because now you're thinking, wow, that cow has a lot of farts, right? So these are the kinds of things that we can use to really engage with people and really have things stick in their minds because we had an emotional connection. We had some sort of a perspective on the situation that we thought was really valuable and worth sharing with other people. And that's different from just, the straightforward description of what our work is doing. So in summary, tell a story, be descriptive, weave your experience into the science that you're sharing, share your passion, and let the reader share your experience. That's all I've got.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tommy. I think that's all we really have for you guys today. So normally we'd go into more breakout rooms so we can chat through ideas, but I know it's getting close to the time that we set out, so don't want to hold people here longer than we said. But with that, the, these are all really great presentations. So we want to encourage you guys to internalize all this, think it through, bug someone at like the next desk or like go talk to your like friends or family about like an idea that you got brewing. Put these things into action, and we would really encourage you all to like uh, put some thought in this, generate some ideas, and come back for the next one. We'll talk about actually putting these on paper or in whatever form of communication that you're hoping to talk about your research in. But yeah, I think if anyone's got any questions, I can hang around for like a couple of minutes. But otherwise, hope to see you guys for the next one. We'll let you know when that's going to be happening. Yeah,
Yeah,
if
it would
anyone
be
has anything to
amazing
add. Mhm.
if you all are generating ideas, write them down now while those ideas are fresh, start to build something, and then take that thing to the second workshop series and continue to develop them there.